little bit about how this event is going to run. So tonight we're going to hear from a panel of guest speakers. We have our Deputy Incident Controller from SES, we have the Department of Environment and Water, we have the Local Government Association, the Department for Infrastructure and Transport, Housing SA, SA Power Networks, and SA Water, and I will give you a bit of an update from Primary Industries who couldn't be here tonight. So we'll listen to all our speakers first, who may also answer your questions, and then after they've finished, I'm going to open the floor for questions. So I am going to ask you to hold on to your questions until the last speaker has spoken. Now, when you came in tonight, you might have been given a pen and some post-it notes. We really do want to hear your concerns and your questions. And if you look up at the wall here, we have some large butcher's paper, and I'm going to encourage you to write down questions and pop it up there under the different agencies. If you're not sure where your question belongs, at one of the tables at the back, there are some pointers there about which agency could answer the question. And what will happen at the end of the night is the different agencies will take away those post-it notes, have a look at them, and they'll start to feed back some of that information into their FAQs on their website and on their social media. So, without much more introduction, I'd like to introduce the first speaker. We have Robert Charlton from the SES, the Deputy Incident Controller.
All right, thank you, Ashana. As you said, my name's Robert Charlton. I'm here representing the SES as one of the Deputy Incident Controllers. So obviously I don't need to tell you that we are facing a situation that we haven't seen for many years with the floods. Often as the SES we talk about risk, and we talk about, you know, there may be a flood coming, there may be severe weather, and it might happen, but I guess the situation is that we know it's going to happen, and in some areas it is already happening. So we're already seeing an increased flow across the border, and I'll let DW talk more about sort of the forecast, but we are seeing an increase currently. Across the border is 119 gigalitres per day, with it continuing. So you may have heard talk about the fact that this is the highest flow since the 1970s. We often talk about the 1974 floods, and some of you might have been around to experiencing that. Some of you maybe you didn't. But even those that were there, it may not be exactly the same. So, you know, it's a good comparison to be able to understand and think that, you know, it got to this particular level, you know, on your property or on other areas that you can relate to. But we've also seen a lot of changes in the river, in the channels and so forth over the years. So it's not 100% guaranteed that it'll be the same height. It could be more, it could be less. So just sort of keep that in the back of your mind. But what we want to do is obviously give you some information tonight, answer your questions, as Oshana said, but just trying to help you to prepare for this, because it's going to take a long time to come up. We've been sort of preparing for this since July. We've been sort of working through, and as the situation increases, we're putting a lot more preparation, a lot more planning and effort into it. But we know that this is going to be something that is going to last weeks and into months potentially, once the waters are up. And we know that some areas are already being impacted now. So we have an incident management team that's working out of Loxton, and they've been working for some months now and will continue to work over the coming months to provide support and manage this particular incident. They're being well supported by a lot of other different agencies that you can see here tonight, local government and right across state government and federal government where applicable as well. So we've been working with them for some time just to try and understand what the impacts are, what the risks are, and what we can do to help people prepare, such as yourselves, but also to plan for how are we going to support people throughout this period. We know that this is not a short-term event, and I guess that's one of the things that we really want you to take away tonight, that, you know, the water isn't going to come up and just stay up for a few days or even a few weeks. Some areas will be up for weeks and possibly into the months. for this. And we'll talk a little bit later about sort of the modelling and the forecasts and so forth. I'll leave that up to DEW to talk about that. We are obviously also working at across state and, as I said, federal level where possible to, again, prepare and support the community. You would have heard today, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but there's a lot of information announced about specific funding to help people prepare, but also funding for relief and recovery. So that's actually really important to support that. So as I said, we are seeing impacts already. You would have, some of you probably possibly already had properties that have been impacted in the shack areas. We may see properties impacted where the water comes into that, but it may be that your property is impacted by access and egress, so roads that are cut off. And again, that may be for long periods of time. It may be power that's cut off. So it might be fine that your property is still okay and no damage has occurred, and hopefully no damage will occur, but it might be that it's just impacted by the lack of services and lack of ability to get there. We obviously have been providing sandbagging locations across the Riverland and River Murray areas, and we've got currently sites running 7 days a week between 9 and 3 p.m. And that's at Blanchetown, Mannum, Bow Hill, Murray Bridge and Glossop. And the details are all on the SES website if you need to know, go and find out a bit more about where they're at. That may change the locations depending on the risk as things progress, but we're trying to provide that as best as we can there with those situations. We do have a couple of warnings on our website, and we'll update those weekly or as required. So again, that just gives you a little bit more information about the fact that what the water levels are doing and what the risk is. As I mentioned, there's a lot of information on various websites. At the back there's some handouts which give you some various websites you can go to, phone numbers where you can get information from. We've got a lot on our SES website, as do other agencies, but I guess if you can't remember any of these different ones, think about the www.sa.gov.au. That's got a link to everybody's information, so if you can remember that one, take that one home, and that'll give you a lot of information. Obviously also various agencies are putting things out on their social media. We know local councils are also putting a lot of information out, as well as various different associations and so forth there, just to try and give you as best as we can. One of the important things that you can find on those various websites is links to inundation maps. So maps that show models. They're not guaranteed to say that if your house is within that area that it's definitely going to flood, or your shack, or that it definitely isn't, but they're a guide, the best model that we have to give you an indication of what the risk is. So that'll help you to know what you need to do for preparation. Is your property likely to be at risk of flooding or not? So that's probably one of the first things that you can do. Go along and have a look there. Then if you do identify that your property is potentially at risk, then you can start to determine what do you need to do. If it's a property, when you know a lot of shacks where the construction is that it's built so that the water can go into the lower parts without impacting the upper part of the house, that you can then determine what do you need to actually secure, what do you need to move away, do you need to empty out your septic, fill it up with water so that it's clean, nothing dirty floats out into the river, but also it doesn't float away as the water comes in. We've got on our website, there's copies at the back of the room, there's a fact sheet that you can download that gives you a bit of information to help you prepare your property. But definitely consider about what are the impacts to your property, but what are the impacts to the roads, what are the impacts to, where there may be loss of power. And again, as I've said, and I just want to really stress, it could be for weeks or even potentially months for these things. Think about if you are, enjoying the river, and we don't want to say people can't go to the Riverland. We don't want to say people can't enjoy the River Murray. It's actually a really interesting time. We're likely to see a lot of really positive environmental things that come out of the river, but we want you to do it safely. So we want you, again, to just make sure that you're aware of the surroundings, aware of what's happening, aware of the fact that there's a lot of extra water in places where normally it wasn't, and normally we don't see that. So there may be submerged objects, there may be infrastructure that's under the water, there may be things floating in the water that are coming downstream. So just be really careful with that. But, you know, if it's within your skill set, enjoy the water safely for that. Drains and so forth, again, maybe, you know, there may be something under the water that you just don't see there. So I'm guessing a lot of people here tonight are obviously shack owners rather than necessarily permanent residents, but there may be some people, you know, living near you in your area that may need to make a decision about whether they're going to stay. And you know, they're all well prepared and they're safe and everything is all okay. They've got power, they've got, you know, supplies, and the roads are going to be okay. But some people may need to make that decision, and possibly some of you even here tonight may need to make the decision about, do you need to go now? You know, do you need to, again, once you've assessed the risk, to determine that. And so we'd encourage you to think about that, or go back and have a talk to your neighbours and so forth. Think about what is the plan. If we are going to be isolated for a longer period of time, you know, is it okay? Have you got the ability to get supplies in and out, medication, all of those types of things that you need to consider. Again, there's a lot of information on the various websites about how to develop an emergency plan, just to consider it could be that longer term. If you are going to stay, you know, let your family and friends know. So again, go back, talk to your neighbours that you know are permanent residents in some of these areas. We know there are some in the shack areas, and think about that. But what are you going to do if at the last minute you decide to go? You know, obviously as emergency services and all of the different agencies, everyone will do their best to help you if you're in trouble, but sometimes it's not safe for us to get there. So again, the best thing that you can do is to think about that, plan for it early and discuss it with your neighbours and so forth. So yeah, just keep up to date with any warnings. We'll have all that information on the various websites, and yeah, just please have a look at all of the information there to help you prepare. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. I'd now like to call up Kimberly Williamson from the Department of Environment and Water.
Sorry, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. My name's Kimberly Williamson. I'm from the Department for Environment and Water, and I'm going to talk to you about water levels and forecast flows. So as many of you would already be aware, the current forecast flow to South Australia is estimated to reach at least 175 gigalitres per day in early December. We expect this area to arrive at areas around Morgan and downstream of Lock 1 around the 20th to the 27th of December. So it will take some time to move down from the border. We've also said there's a moderate possibility that this peak could reach 200 gigalitres per day, and a lesser possibility that it may reach 220 gigalitres per day. So to give you a bit of a comparison, today the flow at the border is 119 gigalitres per day. Normally at this time of the year we receive about 6 gigalitres a day, so quite a big increase. One of the reasons why we do provide a range of flows, so 175 to 220, is that it's only once water arrives around places like Wentworth, so when it's flown down the Darling, the Murrumbidgee, the Edward-Wacool rivers and the Goulburn, that we get a really good picture of exactly what the flow is going to be at the border. So as the flow moves closer to the border, we'll be able to hone in on that forecast and provide a more accurate figure. You would have also heard yesterday increased releases from storages such as Hume Dam over the last week, and continued rainfall in the upper states has meant that there is also potential for this peak to be extended for a longer time period, or for a second peak to arrive at the South Australian border. At this point in time, it's too early to tell if that water coming down is just going to make the current peak longer, or if it's going to be higher and create a second one. But we want to give you as much time as you can to prepare, so we're just putting this information out there. Over the coming weeks, we'll have more information as to what it's all going to mean. Regardless of if there is a second peak or not, flows to South Australia are going to persist for quite a while. they're always going to flow, sorry, the higher flows are going to persist for some time. It's likely that we're going to see flows above 100 gigalitres a day, at least into February next year. So we're talking a number of months. The best way that you can stay up to date with the flow forecast is by looking at the SES warnings, listening to your ABC radio, but also via the South Australian River Murray Flow Report. That's an email that we put out every Friday morning, giving you the flow forecast and any other news that you may need to know. You can subscribe to that by going to the sa.gov.au website and following the links, or come and see me after the meeting and I can subscribe you. Included in that flow report are estimated water levels for various flow rates at locations along the river. So that's a bit of a sentence, but for example, in last week's report, we had the water level that we have modelled at flow rates of 180 gigalitres per day and 200 gigalitres per day. So it's just to give you a bit of an idea of how high the water could potentially get. One thing to remember though, when looking at these estimated water levels and any of the inundation maps that we have, they are developed using hydraulic and hydrologic models, so they're not actual events. In reality, every flood event is going to differ, and that can be due to a range of factors such as vegetation cover, any physical changes in the river channel that have occurred since the last flood event, and the presence or removal and damage of any earthen structures since the modelling was done. So just keep that in mind. It's really only used to be used as a guide to give you an idea if you are more at risk. The last thing that I'll also mention is that there are currently blackwater events upstream of South Australia in New South Wales and Victoria. This is when levels of dissolved oxygen in the water fall, and it causes the water to turn quite black. It also gets quite smelly, and it can often cause fish deaths. So there's currently no reported blackwater events in South Australia, but just be mindful that it is likely that this could happen over the coming weeks and months. Department for Environment and Water, along with various other agencies, will be monitoring the situation closely and undertaking any mitigation measures where appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'd like now to call on Clinton Jury from the Local Government Association.
Thanks, Oshana. I'll keep this brief too, just on account of allowing some more times for questions. But the Local Government Association represents the 68 councils that we have in our state, and we're actively supporting the SES as the control agency for our councils, undertaking a lot of the work that I'll talk about now. From our perspective, it's vital that the state government and local government continue to work really, really closely together. We've seen some really important headway made in the last few weeks and months, but councils generally, in addition to the stuff that's more visible, are making significant contributions across this space. There's obviously coordinating and carrying out the road and land closures. We're actively assessing the levies, managing the assets that we have to keep them protected for your communities as we pull through this, and then also working to amplify the messages more broadly to make sure that you're all looking in the right place for the information you need. Quite specifically, some of the work that's been going on by councils to varying degrees, and it depends where you are situated, road and land closures particularly, so signage, rubble, concrete blocks you might have seen, bollards continuing to appear and reappear and be moved as the water level rises and as further areas become inaccessible. Notification, I should point out, of those road closures. Keep an eye on the council websites of the area you're going. They are being updated very, very regularly. A lot of the significant work that councils for some months now have been undertaking and will continue to do is around assessing the levees as part of the main system and repairing those and building and rebuilding where needed. A lot of work in recent days, you will have seen activity around the temporary levees that are starting to appear, and that's particularly more so downriver, but a significant amount of work done by councils working in conjunction with the state government and the SES on where to put those. A number of other things that councils are involved in, for example, around the water treatment plants, the sewerage facilities, making sure they continue to be kept as safe as possible and working. Notwithstanding too, how do we keep collecting your rubbish? Important matters like that councils deal with every day, they're continuing to do. They've also been removing pontoons and barbecues and gangways, etc., as that's needed. There's a significant amount of stormwater that being moved by pumps by local government across the whole Murraylands and Riverland area, and that's just to manage the extreme weather events we've been having on top of this. I guess importantly though, just to reinforce the earlier messages, that single source of truth, have a look at the sa.gov.au website. You can follow the links to there, or if you have specific concerns or questions about your council area, please contact the council. We've got a couple of the CEOs, one from Mid-Murray, one from the rural city of Murray Bridge, who can answer more specific questions later. But please reach out to your council and they'll be more than happy to help. And I guess it's really just to reinforce too that with all of these activities, all of the councils are involved at varying levels and degrees depending on what's happening in the communities at the moment. Obviously a huge focus at the moment further up the river, but all of the towns and communities downstream are working very, very closely on keeping people, property, assets as safe as we possibly can. So thank you.
Thank you, Clinton. And as Clinton said, there are a few CEOs in the audience. When we go to question time, you may want to actually ask them questions. So now I'm going to invite Tony Scarlett from the Department of Infrastructure and Transport.
Thanks, Ashana. So my name is Tony Scarlett and my role is the Stakeholder Engagement Coordinator for Regional South within Road Maintenance, and I'm based out at Murray Bridge. So I'll be giving you a brief overview of the impacts of this event to ferries, marine safety and state roads today. So our department has been working hard on planning ahead to ensure that our roads, ferries and marine environment continues to be a safe place for the community. I'll start with ferries and can advise that some of our ferries may need to close as the water levels rise over the highest landing point. Our marine team will be taking regular measurements to make sure we are timing the closing and reopening of ferries with the safety of both the public and the ferry operators in mind at all times. The Waikerie ferry will be closing tomorrow to allow our marine team to connect to the higher landing. It will then reopen under restrictions until there's enough water under the ferry to allow full use. Other ferries that are likely to close in the next week or so include Morgan and Lirrup. In the coming weeks, the Mannum, Swan Reach, Walker Flat and Purnong ferries will be at risk of closure as the river rises above their highest landing points. Our marine team are doing their best to ensure that ferries are kept running safely as long as possible and communities are kept informed. Communications about ferry closures will be made via social media and also on our website at dit.sa.gov.au. We have a dedicated page for ferry locations and operational status that's kept up to date. All closures will have appropriate signage and detour routes provided where applicable. The closures will also be posted on the Traffic SA website at trafficsa.gov.au once they're in place. In regard to activities on the river itself, we're having an announcement tomorrow that there will be a 4-knot speed limit and restrictions for vessels on the River Murray. So to protect infrastructure and the safety of all river users and property owners, restrictions on boat and marine activities will now apply on the River Murray, including a 4-knot vessel speed limit in certain locations. All vessels and any other watercraft on the River Murray are restricted to a speed of 4 knots when operating within 250 metres of any partially or wholly submerged dwelling or building, within 250 metres of any partially or wholly submerged levee bank, and at night or during conditions of low or restricted visibility. Also, any personal watercraft, commonly referred to as jet skis, must not exceed a speed of 4 knots on any part of the River Murray. We're also asking rivergoers they're not permitted to swim, bathe or dive within 250 metres of a lock or weir. Canoes, kayaks, surf skis, rowboats or other human-powered vessels or aquatic toys are also not permitted to be used within 250 metres of a lock or a weir. Any boats or any boats under 12 metres will have to ensure that all passengers on board are wearing a life jacket at all times, even when the vessel is at anchor. Now, just to clarify, 4 knots is commonly referred to as a fast walking speed. So that's quite a slow speed on the river. So you're getting the scoop here tonight because that will come out in the media tomorrow. So all our marine safety team have been carefully marking out all the hazards on the water with signage and yellow buoys, and we encourage river users to report hazards to our marine safety team through our report form on our website. That's part of the reason we're lowering the speed, because there are a lot of submerged items in the river at the moment which you can't see. So if any river users identify any submerged items that have not been signposted or flagged, please report them to our website so that they can be tagged. Now onto the state roads. Our road maintenance team have already assessed which state roads are likely to be subject to flooding and what detours will be appropriate. Some of the roads that we expect to be inundated are the low-lying roads that lead to some of the ferries, which will mean the ferries will not be able to operate. These include the Tailem Bend and Wellington ferries. These detours have been posted on our website. So when the roads get inundated, we'll have to close those ferries. But they are possibly a little way further on than the ones I've listed ahead. Please remember it's not safe to drive into floodwaters at any time. And if members of the public come across any dangers on the road, including floodwaters, they can be reported 24/7 to the Traffic Management Centre on 1800 018 313. Any road closures will be posted to social media and updated on the Traffic SA website. Now, the Traffic SA website lists all road closures. We've been working very closely with all the local councils who have also been telling us about their road closures. So you can go to that website and see all road closures, including the council roads. That Traffic SA website lists current closures. It doesn't forecast closures. So that's where you might be able to go to our, if you go to the sa.gov.au website, that has the links to all of the other areas. It has links to the DIT website that has those detour routes that gives you the forecasted detours once the roads are closed. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And just to let you know, I know probably some of you have actually picked up some information as you came in tonight. We do have an important contact sheet there with a whole range of people that you're going to be speaking to and hearing tonight, and a whole range of other agencies on there that you can actually take with you. It's just a double-sided one, so that's a bit of a useful one to have. Now, before I go on to my next speaker, I did want to just give you some brief notes from Primary Industries who actually couldn't be here tonight. They are working across the emergency response, including the River Murray flood and the fruit fly outbreaks in the Riverland. They're working with communities, industry and individuals on a range of food-related matters, including livestock, movement and increased risk of mosquito-borne viruses. PIRSA is supporting the SES as the lead agency and will be called upon for any animal or livestock issues. I think Kimberly from Jude did talk about Blackwater and the fact that there are elevated risks of Blackwater events along the river, including fish kills due to the decreased oxygen levels in the water. And while the flow and management of the water in the river is the responsibility of DEW, in the event of a major fish kill event, PIRSA is the lead agency for the cleanup. They have committed to also working with councils and stakeholders to coordinate the cleanup of fish kills and have developed an emergency response plan for this. If you do notice something unusual along the river, please contact Fishwatch on 1800 065 522. Fruit fly is also still an issue. Please consider the current regional, community and economic impacts of the river region. There is a lot going on. Currently, there are 16 active Queensland fruit fly outbreaks in the Riverland area. If you are planning the trip to the Riverland, check the list of fruit and vegetables on the Fruit Fly website to find out what you can pack. Avoid a fine, pack thoroughly. Use the quarantine bins at entry points to the Riverland to dispose of any fruit and vegetables. Be aware of restrictions within the Riverland on moving certain fruit and vegetables around. Visit the Fruit Fly website to learn more about fruit fly, which is fruitfly.sa.gov.au, and I think we have some information on the tables about fruit fly as well. So now I'm going to call up Shane Pritchard from Housing SA.
Hello, my name's Shane Pritchard. I'm from Housing SA and I'm also the State Manager for Emergency Relief. I'm going to talk to you about three things tonight. The first thing is the purpose of emergency relief, the emergency relief plan that's being put in place and specifically some of the grants that were announced today. And also the emergency relief hotline and where information can be sought. The first thing I wanted to say is that just in the relation to the phases of emergencies. So usually you have a response, then relief very closely connected to the response, and then recovery is the phase after that. Because of this event is fairly non-standard, these three aspects are actually coming together at the same time. So some of the announcements are happening before the event has even hit some of the places, and therefore you'll see that those phases that usually happen in emergency management are actually slightly different. But emergency relief is about supporting people in genuine need of support and in a place of hardship. And the way that we do that is to provide cash and emergency accommodation for people who are escaping from a dangerous area. So in the context of a fire, for example, they would be in the impacted area, they would be evacuating the area, and they would go to the relief centre to be given some personal hardship grants and also some emergency accommodation until the situation has passed. So that's the same in this case, except it hasn't yet occurred in most of the places. So the people aren't evacuating the danger in the same speed that they usually would in these types of events. So the plan for the emergency relief in this situation is slightly different in that we've had to base it on two scenarios. The first scenario is the most likely scenario, which is a rising level of water that slowly but surely inundates a certain number of properties The second scenario is that in fact the levies break in areas that have not been expected, or in fact there's a rapid top-over of the levies. Now, we don't expect either of those things to happen. That's a much lower likelihood of event, but of course we need to plan for the worst. So to meet both of those scenarios, we're going to open a relief centre in Berry next week, and then further down the river at Mannum and probably Murray Bridge also the week after that. So what would happen is if people have a requirement to leave their property, they could go to the Emergency Relief Centre and receive a personal hardship grant, which you would have seen announced today by the Premier, which is $200 for a child, $400 for an adult, and maximum $1,000 for a family. And if the people need short accommodation, then they'll be put into some kind of hotel or cabin or some other way in which we can support people because they've had to leave their property. Some of the other things you would have seen announced today is around the rental assistance, private rental assistance. So this is for people who have sourced another property that they could move into, but would like some assistance in paying for the rent, and also a bond guarantee. So this means that the government will essentially support people in a guarantee of their bond when they find a private rental. So to be eligible for these grants, I'll just go back to my first point, which is around the purpose of emergency relief. So it is actually to support people in genuine hardship. So first of all, it would be people leaving their primary place of residence that they would be afforded this grant. They'd need to be directly impacted by the flooding and not be able to return to their property. It's also not for power outages, insofar as there are going to be constant power outages, which Paul will talk about later on throughout the coming months. It's for people whose properties have been directly impacted by the flooding. The third thing I'd like to talk to you about is the emergency information hotline. I'm not sure if Adam's still here, who actually runs that hotline. And that is basically a number that people can call from any if they're not directly impacted by it, but you can call it even from here in Adelaide to find out what all the different aspects of the support by the government, not just relief. So it'll go through all the things already spoken about here today, and essentially they can talk you through any questions and comments about the sa.gov.au website. And also give you some more information about the relief packages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane. I'd now like to call on Paul Irwin from SA Power Networks.
Thank you, Oshana. Let me say from the outset, the whole organisation is looking to impact as least amount of people as possible. So it's our desire to keep the lights and power on for as many people as we possibly can. But there is an inevitability that there will be disconnections occurring wherever there's low-lying areas of the river, and our infrastructure is going to be impacted. The poles and wires you see in the street are at a certain height, just not for convenience, they're there from a safety aspect as well. There's very high voltages running through those, and they're at a specific height to keep people safe. As you start to reduce those height levels as the river rises, then the risk of shock becomes greater and greater, and that's the reason why we need to disconnect. Over the coming weeks, we look to try and get in while roads and tracks are still open and disconnect where we need to disconnect. Our people are out there doing what we call cutting in breaks to try and disconnect the least amount of people as possible. But as flood levels rise over the coming weeks, we might have to expedite that work and disconnect more people further upstream than we would like to. If you're a local business, if there's anyone here representing a local business in those areas that are going to be impacted, we encourage you to organise to have a registered electrical contractor raise an alteration request if you need to raise your switchboards, pumps, whatever you've got out of the water line. If that's a thing that you can possibly do, we will expedite that alteration for you. So it's something that will happen pretty much straight away as soon as your electrician can organise it. We have a brochure that looks like this on the back desk in that corner over there. We'd encourage you to pick one of those up. There's a set of QR codes. One of them, the most important one, is for SMS updates. It's the primary way we look to communicate with you during this event, this flooding event. If you already get messages about planned and unplanned interruptions for your shack or your home, then you're already subscribed to that service now. If you don't get messages about it, we'd encourage you to do that. If you're not good with QR codes, like I'm not good with them, there's a telephone number at the bottom here, which is our general inquiries, 13 12 61. Just call that number and our people will take you through and sign you up for that. Throughout the event, we'll be communicating with you weekly. If we disconnect your property, you'll get an SMS from us weekly that just says flood levels are still up, they're still rising, or they've started to taper off, and we'll just continue to communicate with you until the point where we can actually get in to start looking to reconnect some of these areas. When floodwaters have completely sort of receded, there'll still be a handful of days we'll need to wait so we can actually access those areas, because the ground will be obviously quite boggy for a period of time. As far as safety is concerned, if your property is likely to be flooded, it's best to make it electrically safe now before waters rise. And to do that, we encourage you, and I'm probably telling you things you already know, for any appliances that you have that you think will be impacted by the floodwaters, to unplug them and raise them up high as you possibly can, or remove them from your property. We encourage you to turn off the main electrical switch at your switchboard. If you've got solar panels, we ask you to isolate those as well. And if you're not sure how to do that, you can call us on that number 13 12 61 and we'll take you through the process on how you do that. You can get a qualified electrician to come in and do that for you as well. If you have a battery, if any of you have a battery at your property, lithium-ion batteries submerged in water have exploded in the past. So we'd encourage you to have that completely removed and taken somewhere safe. Solar panels and batteries, you paid a lot of money to have these installed over a period of time, so you want them working when the time comes for the power to come back on. We've contacted and will be contacting your retailers, the people that send you a bill, and advising them we've disconnected your property. That way you won't get a nasty surprise of an estimated bill coming through to you and somebody asking you for money when you just haven't been there and the power hasn't been on. We'll also advise your retailer when the power comes back on. As far as when you do come back to your property, if floodwaters have impacted your home to a point where it's impacted some of the lower level power outlets that you have, we'd suggest you get an electrician in just to make sure that your property's safe. If the water lines come up to your switchboard, your electrical switchboard, and impacted that, you'll need to get a registered electrical contractor to come in and provide you with a certificate of compliance that your property is habitable from an electrical perspective. We'll then send our people out to reconnect that particular property. If you see fallen power lines anywhere, we ask you to stay well clear. If you're travelling by boat in floodwaters and you come across any power lines, please don't try and raise them, please don't try and touch them. It could be the last thing that you ever end up doing. So there's a chance of risk or risk of electrocution from those things. If you see poles or wires that have fallen in the water, we ask you to say 150 metres away from them. That's the length of a football field from goal line to goal line, and don't go near them. My compatriot, Cam Daniel, sitting in the front row wearing the same sort of shirt that I am, will be here tonight after the speakers finish, and if you'd like to come and ask us any questions, we'll help you out.
Thank you very much, Paul. And our last speaker for the night, Joshua Zagayev from SA Water.
Thank you, Oshana. I'm going to run through 3 topics for you tonight, and I'm just going to make it clear when I'm moving through so you can follow along with me. They are drinking water services, wastewater services, and the operation of some of the River Murray structures. So first of all, first topic to talk about drinking water services. First of all, to be explicitly clear, there are currently no impacts to drinking water services across any of SA Water's networks as a result of the River Murray flood event. But it's possible that that might occur as the floodwaters peak. Now, that goes into 2 areas. The first of those is quality, and the second of those is supply. So when we talk about quality, you will all be able to see if you head up to the river, essentially the ongoing deterioration of the quality of the raw water in the river, which we pump out to treat to make clean, safe drinking water to be supplied through our network. Kimberly touched on blackwater earlier, and whilst there is no blackwater currently in the South Australian sections of the River Murray, it is entirely likely that will not remain the case and that we will see blackwater. Now, what that means from a drinking water perspective is that that makes it harder for us to treat the raw water into clean, safe drinking water. In reality, the most likely impact that you and I would see when we turn on our tap, and that's in any of the communities that we supply along the river, as well as areas even in metropolitan Adelaide that receive some River Murray water sources, is that we might see a difference in the taste and odour of that drinking water, because our treatment plants might not be able to remove all of the organic compounds that are in the water. They'll do their best and they're designed to cope with it, and they'll do a very good job, but there might be a small component that they might not be able to fully overcome. Now, when we talk about drinking water supply, the main potential concern there is if one of the water treatment plants was inundated with water and basically unable to operate because the equipment was damaged in there. Now, we're putting in place a whole lot of measures to make sure that we've got extra treatment supplies there, some backup pumps, backup generators, and we also know that all of the water treatment plants are located at levels where they're unlikely to be impacted by the water levels. And we know that because we're using the modelling from DW and taking the worst case scenario there. So we're quietly confident on that front, but you know, we can't predict exactly what will happen, so we're being cautious and putting in a whole range of measures to make sure that we're best positioned for that. So moving on from drinking water to wastewater, so sewerage. Again, there are currently no impacts to any of SA Water's wastewater networks. Now, along the river, primarily we're talking about 2 locations where we actually operate large wastewater networks, and that's Mannum and Murray Bridge. Outside of those areas, particularly as we head north, they're predominantly operated by your local council, or you might have people on a community wastewater management scheme, or you might actually be on individual septic arrangements for a property, and again, guidance and governance there from your local council. But in terms of wastewater operations, while there is currently no impact, we do know that there will be some impact to the network of underground pipes, particularly in Mannum and potentially in Murray Bridge. Now, in Mannum, we'll see a small number of properties, particularly in very low-lying riverfront areas, where we will need to proactively disconnect people from the network because it will be inundated with water, and we need to be able to try and keep the majority of the network operating for the biggest number of customers that we can for the longest time that we can. Disconnecting or isolating certain parts of that network, and we can be somewhat targeted in how we do that, is about preventing overflows within properties and also to the wider community and the health and environmental impacts that causes. Now, in Mannum, our team will actually be calling and visiting affected properties from tomorrow onwards for the rest of the week. So if you own a property in Mannum, and you might be particularly on that River Road front section there, you should expect to receive contact from us tomorrow, Thursday or Friday, and the point of that is for us to understand what your plans are and whether or not you might have someone occupying that property, or if you're occupying it yourself, if you've planned to leave, or what kind of arrangements that you've got in place. We need that information to then shape what sort of response and any support that we might need to provide to people when those sections of network are isolated as well. Now, talking about the operation of the River Murray structures here, just some of them. This is just very brief mentions. You might be aware that we operate locks and weirs, for example, on behalf of Murray-Darling Basin Authority. There was a little mention of locks and weirs, so I do need to get up to date with that information and what that impact will be once it's all released tomorrow. So this potentially will change a little bit, but you should just know, particularly if you're a boatie, that the locks, the operation of those has changed. They are essentially closed, and it's because the water level makes them redundant. There is still access at the moment with buoys and lights and the lockies there to help guide people, and it's over weirs, but we'll need to assess what the circumstances actually are tomorrow after we get the DIC guidance. Also, the barrages on the lower lakes, the basic principle that they're being operated at the moment is what comes down goes out, and it just has to be balanced with weather, because there's a physical impact of wind as well as tides on the other side that sometimes prevents water actually going out, but the key principle there is not holding anything back. Related to that is that dredging of the mouth has actually stopped for the time being, and that's just because there is so much water coming down and so much pressure there that, again, that's also redundant and it's not necessary. The mouth is staying open. That's the end of my 3 topics. What I did want to just ask you to do is think about some practical actions. The first one of those is that we really need mobile phone numbers for property owners and occupiers connected to SA Water Services. So if and when we have service interruptions for water or wastewater, we want to be able to let you know, and let you know as directly as we can. So there's a form on the SA Water website, sawater.com.au. If you can head there and make sure that we've got your phone number, that will help us reach out to you. The other thing is social media is one of the best channels for us to share information really quickly and provide it in a format that you can share with other people as well. So apart from following the SES to get their guidance, if you can follow SA Water, that would be really handy for us as well. And also, just generally, if you are ever in an emergency situation or have any interruption to your wastewater or water services, always call us straight away on 1300 SA Water.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Okay, I am going to open the floor. I would like to remind people that we do have people also who are online, and for the people that are online, we are noting down your questions. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And for people in the room, I'm going to ask you to stick to one question per person, please, so that we do give a wider range of people a chance to ask those questions. So my colleagues are going to be walking around with mics and we will start taking questions. So hands up, please, if you have a question.
My question is to SA Power Networks. What happens to the areas that have got underground power?
If you've got underground power, if it's going to be impacted, it's likely to be disconnected. That is, like I said before, we've got our infrastructure at a certain height for a reason, and also buried underground 600 mil or more. What we've learnt from interstate, the floods that have been happening interstate, is when they didn't disconnect power that was underground, the rebuilding of that network was significant. So the ability to be able to disconnect it and then come back and turn it back on and not have adverse impacts, as in weeks of trying to rebuild that, were something that they learnt in the early stages.
Thank you very much, Paul. Now, just before we move on, I am going to tag team it a bit from one side to the other. So I think we might take one over here next. But before we do, I also want to let you know, apart from our wonderful CEOs from Murray Bridge and Mid-Murray Council, we also have Miranda here from South Australian Tourism Commission. So if we do have any questions for tourism, we can take those as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My question is to the lady that, sorry I forgot your name, the lady talking about the flows and when the flows were expected. I'm wondering, will there be a time when you will be able to fairly accurately estimate when each town will receive its peak? For example, like Renmark might receive its peak in a week's time, Waikerie might receive its peak on the 15th, and will you give that information out to people?
Yep, so we currently have that information in our flow report. If you want to come and see me about a specific area afterwards, I've got that information on hand. But yes, we do provide estimated dates of when we think the flow peak will reach locations. Keep in mind it is a range though, because we can't give exact dates. It always changes from event to event, but we do have that information. You can come and see me.
Thank you very much. We'll go over to this side of the floor. Thank you.
Sorry, it's a question for the same person. We've had a look at the maps and you can see the potential inundation, but I can't see the depth, and that will affect us. We're elevated.
Yeah, those maps are only to give an indication of if the inundation will become near a property. It doesn't include the elevation and the depth of the water. Again, we do have estimated water levels, but they're only at key locations and townships along the river. If there was somewhere specific you were looking for, come and see me and I'll get that information for you.
Okay, so...
Kimberly, this one's for you too. So, thank you everybody for the presentation tonight. Kimberly, I'm following Flow Tracker on the internet, which provides the time that the flows are coming down. Once again, I was trying to correlate the flow with the depth, and today I was looking at the depths at different locks.
Yep.
And I noted at Loxton it was about 4-point-something metres. Is that coming our way? And because if that's the depth that it's going to be, I mean, we're history. So that's my question is, it probably correlates or follows on from the lady's question before.
So you're asking if it's a set same depth?
Yeah, all the way through.
Yeah.
So
no, it won't be. So it's going to vary by location, because some areas, for instance, will have more wetlands that water can go into. Other areas will be shallower, and so, or will have cliffs, and so the water depth is going to vary. So unfortunately, we can't say an extra metre here is going to mean an extra metre here. It is going to vary. So if it was 4 metres at Loxton, that doesn't mean it's going to be 4 metres at Morgan. Okay. So it will change. Again, specific levels, come and see me, but general advice is in the flow report if you're looking for that information.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a question for anyone else but Kimberley? I'm going to throw to Adam, I think. Now he's got some questions from our people online.
Thanks, Ashana. Yeah, some really good questions coming through, lots for SA Power Networks. So in particular, the public are keen to see some of these disconnections put onto the SA Power Networks map as actual disconnections, and also some mapping for potential or future disconnections with dates. Are you able to provide any information on that? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Look, we're working through how much information we do give out outside of the people that are actually going to be impacted. So those people that are the shack owners. So there's a little bit of debate within our business about how broad do you make that public, that information that we're saying your property is actually disconnected. We know there's some people out there that potentially take advantage of those sorts of things, which is why we're encouraging people to sign up for that SMS service so that we can deal with you specifically about your property. We've got some generic modelling that we've done with all of the other agencies as well, so to track what those river flows look like. And at the moment, like I said, we're tossing up whether we make that completely public or not.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Can we go take this one, please?
To the CEO of Mid-Murray Council, is there any plans to put a levy on the opposite side of the river to Mannum, the Bolto Reserve and the infrastructure over there?
Sorry, I wasn't sure where the question came from. At the back. No, it's not feasible. So the only temporary levies at the moment are planned for Morgan, Swan Reach we're doing some work on, and what's been proposed in the last couple of days in Mannum.
And can that change?
Not at this stage, no. It's just not feasible. Obviously, we've got 440 kilometres of riverbank. We're just not be able to physically put levees and all those things. So working with the SES, looking at critical infrastructure and making sure that we're maximising the assets that we have, or the resources, we have to make decisions. So unfortunately, we've only got key assets at the moment that we are able to secure with temporary levies.
Okay, any other questions? We've got one up the back, thank you.
So the question is, can councils, put my glasses on, place skip bins out for residents to clear debris?
Who would like to take that? Michael? Thank you.
That is something we'd be prepared to consider on a case-by-case basis. So if you've got a debris issue and you need some support, please contact our customer information service, and we'll assess the need, and if we can help you, we certainly will.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? This gentleman over here.
Thanks very much. Look, I'm not sure who it's for, but just around mosquitoes, and there's a bit of talk about a bad strain and so forth. The mosquitoes are bad enough, certainly around the water when the waters rise, regardless. Noting that scare, I'm led to believe that there's something going to be made available for permanent residents, but for the shack holders and everyone that's going back up to the river to clean up afterwards? Is it going to be made available to everyone, or are there limitations?
Okay, can I clarify, are you talking about the vaccine? Is anyone here that wants to talk to? I know SA Health isn't here at the moment. I do have some information on the table for that, but we may have to take that one on notice if somebody doesn't want to actually answer that, because I know you're right. They've currently made it available for the permanent residents, but I know they are looking at people who are travelling into that area as well. So we might need to get back to you on that one. Any other questions? Either in... Yes? We've got one in the back.
Super fast one. On the skip bins, how about we open the local refuse centre so we can get rid of the debris on our property prior to the flood?
Anyone want to take that one from council? Or yes? Great. Thank you.
I'm not sure where that question was from, sorry. Yeah, obviously, yeah, we will. We're looking at our schedules to make sure that we can open the transfer stations or our landfill site. Obviously, we've got to maximise our resources as well, because we've got most of our staff focused on preparedness, but there's opportunities to do that, so I'm happy to have a conversation with you after and discuss your specific site. If it's in my region, if it's not, then Michael, I'm sure, will be able to help you. Okay,
thank you very much. Any other questions online, Adam?
Yeah, if we can, while we've got the microphone with the council, sorry, back over this side. What provisions will we put in place to expedite building approval processes post this event to help with the rebuild of properties?
I'll take this one again, Michael. No worries. So yeah, we're working with the LGA to try to expedite and facilitate quick approval processes. We do have some legislative exemptions in an emergency management situation, which we have to enable emergency works, not just because you want to put a shed up and it's not to do with the flood. So happy to talk to anyone individually about that, but we're absolutely working with the relevant agencies and department to make sure that we can do that, because we understand that that's really important to recover.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ben. Can we throw over to this gentleman here?
Hello, we're at Caloot Landing. A lot of us down there are preparing sandbag and so forth at the moment. There's a lot of discussion regarding whether it's worth sandbagging or opening the doors and letting it flow through. Depending on heights, expected flows through the area. Is there any real guidance on how high we should be putting our sandbags and then, or letting it flow through?
That's a really good question, and it probably relates a little bit to the depth one as well before. So for the average household, we sort of talk about only needing a small number of sandbags just to protect that. But you're right, there are some situations where more sandbags will actually protect you, but there is a limit. It's a difficult one for me to answer without knowing the depth. Certainly we do talk in our shack flyer about there are situations where you are, and better to actually hold it through. I guess probably the best answer I can give that if you're able to build something reasonable that you think is going to sort of help you for that area, then by all means hold it back. But there is a limit where sandbags just are no longer a viable option. You either can't get enough sand, can't get enough sandbags, or it's just not going to hold it up without collapsing, or it's just going over the top. So probably not the answer you were hoping for, but happy to discuss it offline.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've got one question quickly, probably for Kimberly. The weekly flow report currently only goes to height above 200 megalitres. Are you going to update the report now that you're telling us that it could be 220 or 250, so we can get an idea of where we're sitting?
Yep, definitely. Yeah, it does only go up to 200 at the moment. We don't have an increment of 220, but we can do 250. So I'll see about getting that in this week's report.
Great, thank you very much. Questions? We've got one from Adam.
Another one for you, Robert. Could you provide some advice on sandbagging to protect from sewage, and also what we should do to protect and stop flow from septic tanks? Thank you.
So one of the things that people need to be aware of for sewerage is there is a risk of the water actually coming up through the sewerage and into your house, so flooding from the inside. So we encourage people to put sandbags in toilets, and it might be any other drains that you need to cover up. And then as in relation to septics, if it is possible, pump out the septic, get it all clean, fill it up with water, so that there's no risk of anything actually coming out and contaminating the river or anything in the surrounding areas, but also the weight of that water will help to keep the septic in place if floodwaters come in and start to move it, and it stays where you need it to be for later.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, one more.
Yes, I've got one for Paul, SA Networks. Part of the recovery, we've got our power already turned off. And we will know if we go over 74 flood level, our meter will go underwater. You can turn the power back on, but it took probably a couple of months to get that meter once we solar come on. Have you got enough meters to replace them, or are they going to be checked out? Are they repairable? And if Forbes is underwater, there's going to be a hell of a supply of these meters.
Yeah, so we don't install meters anymore. So we stopped doing that in 2017, and retailers took over installing meters from that point. As far as your property, as soon as you've had it electrically checked out and it's safe, we'd have somebody come out and just perform what we call a bypass. So there's no meter there, we just connect your property, and then we notify the retailer that they need to come out and put a meter on. So for that period of time while it's bypassed, if you were living there, you just get an estimated bill like you'd normally get from the retailer. But to get you back on, we do this no matter what it is, whether it was a flood or a bushfire or whatever happened, we'd come in and bypass that supply, and the meter can catch up at a later time. It's more important that people have power on. That's for absolutely everybody. You don't have to be, if you've got a meter, you've got a meter. And if it goes under and it's destroyed or irreparable, then it will be removed and we'll bypass.
Okay, Adam, do you have any?
I sure do. Can anyone provide some advice on how to deal with asbestos during clean-up?
Is there anybody that would like to take that one? Yeah, thank you very much, Michael.
As we're all aware, asbestos is a very hazardous material. The best advice would be to contact a qualified contractor who is skilled and experienced in the management of handling and disposing of asbestos, because that's where you'll get the best advice.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Any further questions from people? I can't see any hands. Anything, Adam?
We've got lots from online if we want to keep going.
Yep.
Some question around predictions beyond Lake Alexandrina. Will those be updated, and will we have some more information for those communities?
Sorry, are we talking around the lake or upstream?
I think it's around the lake, and then what's coming out of the lake. Sorry, I put it under my big pile of notes here now.
That's okay. Yeah, we are confident at this point in time that we can manage the lower lakes to be around between 0.65 of a metre and 1 metre. We do have this handy tool with the barrages, and when we can get water out, we have been letting out as much as we possibly can to keep that water level around 0.65. There are going to be times when we will close the barrages, and residents will see that there'll be temporary rises in the water level. Once we're able to open the barrages again, that often goes back down. So we haven't provided mapping for that area yet because we are confident that we can manage it within normal operating levels.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, I have one for tourism. Just questions around some advice for people wanting to travel and still support that area and the economy and the Riverland and Murraylands more broadly. What advice have you got for them?
Thank you for the question. We are currently still promoting the region as long as it's safe and working through the advice of the SES. Yes, so we have had people going up there recently, as long as it is safe, but once it becomes a risk, then we will not do any kind of campaigns. We are prepared when it comes to the recovery to put some funding and some initiatives and campaigns to get the Riverland back as a top destination when the time comes. So we're already working on, you may have seen today in the Premier's announcement, on a voucher scheme and some specific incentives to help promote the river back to its full potential as a destination when that time comes. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Miranda. Anything we haven't already touched on?
Just one more here. Do we need to notify DIT about submerged signposts, jetties, planks, etc.? And if so, I guess how do we report those?
Anything that's submerged that isn't already marked, yes, please do notify us. You can go to the sa.gov.au website, and then when you scroll down, there's a marine link, and on going through there, there's a section for notifying us of hazards in the water, if you get too stuck, you can ring the TMC and they'll guide you anyway.
No worries, thank you. And just a general comment that the people online have just asked all of the resources that have been referenced tonight, if they could be posted through your social networks as well, they'd appreciate that.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Just another question for you. The speeds that you said, 4-knot zones, obviously with the increased flow, the river's probably going to be travelling at maybe 7 k's an hour, which is basically your 4 knots. So when working against that, is that what speed? Is that 4 knots on top of that, which would be then 14, and you'd be putting out a reasonable size wake in boats?
Well, the vessel needs to travel at 4 knots. So whatever that, so that's counteracting any current that they're working against. Yeah, so the idea is that they're not creating the wakes. That's the idea. So, does that help? Yeah. Yes, well, this is around the dwellings and the levee banks, so, hopefully it will discourage people to be around those things anyway. Yep.
Okay, probably 1 or 2 more questions we can take. Oh, yes, this gentleman down here.
While we get a microphone down there, Ashana, Mid-Murray Council specifically, but I guess this is probably more broad across all councils, once the water levels recede, will there be assistance to pump out septics, the water that's filled the septics at all?
Individual septic tanks will be the responsibility of the individual property owners. The swim systems, obviously, we will work with those shack areas that do have the swim systems to assist in that space.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, SES. Regarding police presence during the flood, is there going to be a reasonable presence of police on the water protecting people's properties?
Obviously, I can't speak for exactly what police are going to do, but we do work regularly with police, and I can assure you if there is a risk, that's something that they will address. We meet regularly with them to determine that. So on the water, it will vary. So marine safety is obviously covered by DIT, but if there is a need for an increased police presence, they will follow that up.
Is it on? Yeah, so I met with Superintendent Denny, who is responsible for the area. They are increasing their patrols, both in the air and on the river, and they've got assets on both sides of the river as well. They're very mindful of the potential impact in that area. I don't want to speak for SAPOL, but that was the message that was delivered to councils just recently.
Thank you very much, Ben. We can take one more. This gentleman up the back here.
I'm not sure who to direct it to, just wondering, will all boating be banned at any stage? like it has been upstream?
The only interest we've got at the moment is safety. So the only reason that would happen is if there is a danger to people. So at this point in time, we're putting restrictions on speed and areas, and that's because of safety. So the only reason there would be a ban on any use of the river would be for safety reasons. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, any other, one final question? Yes, please.
Thank you. You mentioned that you're going to keep the lake at minimum of 0.65 level up to a metre. Would it not make sense to lower as much as you possibly can to save the impact higher upstream? It's not going to affect a lot of people at the lake. So keeping it 6.68 seems silly when you can let more water out.
Yeah, there's a couple of factors into why we're not keeping it lower. One of the reasons is we've actually had a lot of high tides and swells of late, so it has been difficult to actually release water out of the barrages because often the Coorong will be higher than the lakes and we can't push water upstream, unfortunately. The other factor is we've still got to consider all the irrigators and users around the lakes who need access to that water. Adelaide's drinking water supply is also taken from downstream of Lock 1, so we do need to be mindful that there are people who do need access to the water at those water levels. But yeah, do take your comment, we've had that a lot.
I understand that in 1974 floods there was a bit of a stuff up at the barrages and they couldn't let as much water out as they should have. So what can we do to ensure that that doesn't happen again?
I'm not sure of the specific circumstances, but rest assured we are taking every opportunity we can to try and release water out of the barrages. There will probably come a time when we will open them and just leave them open and stop closing them. Normally we close them to stop seawater going back into the lakes, but there will probably become a time where we'll say, no, we're leaving them open because any salt water that does get pushed in will very quickly get pushed out again. So that time will come and hopefully that will prevent any things like that happening again.
Okay, I have time to take one final question if anyone has one. No, I can't see any hands. So I'd like... Oh, yes, there is one.
Thought I'd got away with that. To be honest, if we'd done it 3 weeks ago, I don't think it would have made a big difference because of the tides and the swells. We haven't had that many opportunities to actually push water out. To be honest, I think it will be coming very shortly. That's something we're actively discussing. So I'd say in the next few weeks that would definitely be here, if not imminently.
Okay, that's going to conclude our meeting for tonight. I want to say thank you very much to everybody who's attended, to the people online, to our wonderful guest speakers who've come here to give you a whole range of information. There is information for you to take away, and once again I think everybody here has talked about the fact that they're working together collaboratively. Now it's time for all of us to get ready. Okay, and there's some information that can help you to actually do that. If you do want to hang around and chat with a speaker, please do so. Thank you very much.